guys, in this video we will be showing you how to first set up vendors. A vendor will have two trunks. The same vendor will have two trunks. One will be a CLI route and the second will be a non-CLI route. Each trunk will have its own tech prefix required by the vendor. We will also create a routing group in the Softswitch, and then we'll show you how to do two things. One is how to set up a soft phone that will send a call to the vendor route after you initiate a call. And once we're done with that, we'll also show you how to add a wholesale client, whitelist the IPs, and point them to the vendor route that you want to route them to. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, after you have accessed your Cloud Softswitch interface, let's first create a vendor cost. So before you start sending calls to a vendor, you need to know what the cost will be per minute for the destinations you want to send. So let's assume that our vendor that we're interconnecting with is called ABCD, and they will offer us two routes or two trunks. One will be CLI trunk, the other one will be non-CLI trunk. So what we first need to do is add a new cost here. We'll call it ABCD CLI cost. Save. Then add a new one, and we will call it ABCD no CLI cost. So we have created two destination sets or two vendor costs that one is going to be dedicated to our premium CLI route cost from this vendor. The second one will be for non-CLI. So what we need to do now is basically add rates or routes to these destination sets. And what we're going to do, let's start first with the CLI, ABCD CLI cost. And let's assume that this vendor is offering us Nigeria termination. So what we'll do is add a new route. 234 is the country code for Nigeria. And we'll set up the cost. Let's set 8 cents for now. Save and close. Now we have added it successfully, so we do have an active rate for 234 under this vendor cost, ABCD CLI. Now we'll go to vendor cost and do the same for the non-CLI sheet. So we'll click on open routes. I apologize, but my internet connection is kind of slow, so this will be a little taking some time. So under the non-CLI cost, we'll add another prefix, which is 234, the same country, but this will have a different cost of, let's say, 5 cents, since this is a non-CLI route. So we're good to go. We have completed the vendor cost and added the rates for each one. So you can either add countries one by one using the add button to enter individually, or you can download the template, fill all the codes that you want to fill in that template, and then upload it, select and upload. So that could be useful for an A to Z upload. So now, since we have added the vendor cost, let's add the vendor now. So as described here, we're gonna add a vendor, A, ABCD, and this vendor is gonna have two different routes or two different trunks. So we have already added the cost for each one. So let's give that a shake real quick. So this one was done, the cost was done for the CLI and for the non-CLI. So we have completed these two things. Now what we're gonna do is add the vendor name and then add two trunks inside of it, or two connections. One will be for CLI, one will be for non-CLI. So first, to add a new vendor, we'll click add. And you have to remember that your vendor ABCD, for example, will provide you with usually with an IP address. For example, 10.0.0.1, and then this vendor will tell you that to use our CLI route, you need to send a different tech prefix for each one. So they will say something like, to send calls to our CLI trunk, you need to use a prefix 1234, for example, prefix 1234 hash. And to use our non-CLI trunk, you need to use a prefix 2222 hash. Now, so let's simulate this scenario, or let's try to do this scenario here. So first we will need to add a vendor and call it vendor ABCD, and then save and close. And then what we're going to have to do is create a CLI connection and a non-CLI connection to this vendor. So we'll go inside ABCD. So you need to click Open Connections. Then we need to add connection name will be CLI, and the IP address is going to be 10.0.0.1. And they asked us to send a prefix 1234 for this to use the CLI route. So in order to do this, you need to go to CLD translation rule, and we're going to type S and go like that. So what this means, what this does is going to be adding 1234 hash before the dialed number. So if you're dialing to Nigeria like this, it will basically, this rule here will add the tech prefix in front of it. So it will be sent to the vendor like that. So I hope that makes sense. So we have added the tech prefix that we need to send. We have put the IP address and gave it a name. So that's all you need for it to work. Save and close. Now let's do the non-CLI connection. So as you can see here, we're in vendors, ABCD, open connections, and we have added the CLI and gave it a prefix, and now we'll do the non-CLI, which is right here. And this is going to take a prefix of 2222 pound. So let's go CLI, and the IP is going to be the same in this case, and we're gonna send a prefix of 2222 hash, and that's it. We have now added the vendor. We have added two routes, one for CLI, one for non-CLI. We gave each one a prefix and set the IP for each connection, which is like that. And we have also completed the vendor cost. We added the rates for Nigeria 234 for each one. So basically, the vendor addition for a new interconnection is done. Now, what we need to do is create a routing group. And what this routing group does is basically it will have all of the routing information inside of it, like the vendor name, the route, etc. So routing table or group. So now let's do this part here since we have added our connections. So to add a routing group, you'll need to go to routing, then go to routing groups. And this routing group is what we will assign later to the either to the soft phone client or the wholesale client in order for it to know for the Softswitch to know which vendor to send the calls to. So I hope that makes sense. Now let's add a new routing group and we will call it to ABCD vendor, for example. And here we can give it a description like routing calls to vendor ABCD with to using least cost routing. Or let's stick with CLI route only. Now, what you need to do in this routing group is basically just choose the vendor, choose the routing. We're going to use just CLI route in this case, and use the ABCD CLI cost so that it will know how to bill and route the call, and then add that by clicking on the green button that was here, and then save and close. So now we have a routing group that will link our account with the vendor. So this part is done. Now what we need to do is start working on our account or client setup. So first of all, let's talk about the soft phone client. But before we do that, you have to know that the same way for an account to be able to use the system or to be created, it must have a tariff or a sell price, a sell rate, like a selling tariff, so that the system knows how to bill this client according to what rate. So we added our vendor cost here that was to Nigeria at like charging our cost is 8 cents to Nigeria CLI. So what we're going to try to do here is sell it to add a tariff and sell it to this client. Tariff 234. We're going to sell it to them at, let's say, 9 cents. Okay. And then assign this tariff to the client so that the system will deduct from their balance according to the rate set in the tariff. So to do that, we're gonna go to tariffs and currencies. And we're gonna have to give a name for this tariff that will be used in the soft phone client or in the wholesale client. So we're gonna add a new one. Or let's actually use, no, we'll add a new one, don't worry about it. So we're gonna call this tariff, let's call it test Nigeria. Okay. We're gonna call that tariff test Nigeria. Okay. And Now you can enable what we call enable loss protection in order to ensure that the call is not routed to the vendor in case the selling price is below the buying price. So this is something, it's a good practice to enable this in a production system so that it automatically protects you from not losing money. So let's keep that enabled. And we have added that. Now open rates, we're going to have to add the country code, which is 234, and we're going to sell at 9 cents. And since our buying rate is 8 and our selling is 9, that will that the call should pass because because the buying price is less than the selling price. So we have done that. Next step we're going to have to do in order to be able to assign this tariff to the account is add what a service plan. And let's call it, you can call it the same thing. We'll just call it Test Nigeria. Test Nigeria. And we're going to choose the Test Nigeria basic tariff here and save and close. And now we have completed these two steps and added as well a service plan. So we have done all the things that are needed in order to start working on adding our soft phone client or our wholesale client. So now let's go to accounts